When it comes to family caregivers, there's really no shared narrative other than the role often catches us unprepared. We're forced to put our own lives on hold, often having to reduce hours or leave the workforce altogether. Professional caregivers make up one of the largest and fastest growing workforces today, providing full-time care or moving from home to supplement a family caregiver. They may also be caring for their own children and or aging parents. With our aging population, caregiving will only grow. 7 in 10 Americans turning 65 today will need care for prolonged periods at some times in their lives. So, who is caring for the caregiving? 25% of whom report that caregiving has caused their health to decline. Over 1/3 report moderate to high levels of financial strain. Caregiving is also having a huge impact on the workforce because of its drain on talent, lost productivity, and increase in medical costs. It has emerged as one of the central yet perhaps least understood or addressed issues facing employers today. Caregiving can be emotionally, physically, and financially stressful, even more so during this pandemic. It can also offer moments of profound personal reward. So joining me to discuss this important topic are three panelists: Helen Adioson, CEO and founder of the Care Academy; Rashmi Romanov, Vice President of Programs and Partnership at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation; and Gisela Dolan, Global Chief Advocacy Officer at Home Instead.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you so much, Diane. I really appreciate just a wonderful introduction and ditto on a lot of points. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen Adioson, CEO of Care Academy, and at Care Academy, we provide online professional development. And in reflection for today, I really wanted to bring something to the fore. I think that there's such a natural tendency in the policy world, and I think when we think about caregiving, to dichotomize caregiving, right? It is either sort of formal or informal. And I think what we've started seeing over the course of the past several years is a blurring of those lines of what it means to be a family or a paid caregiver. And I think, Diane, you spoke to this eloquently in the opening in terms of how that is blurring, how even paid caregivers are also caregiving in their own homes. And we also see just a set of innovative new programs, including the Consumer-Directed Personal Assistance Program, which is actually changing the nature of what it means to be the family caregiver rather. And so we just see that, and I think this is thematically what's going to come up in our conversation today, that the future has essentially been exacerbated by COVID-19. The future is essentially now. And we see this, and the ongoing refrain at Care Academy has been never waste a good crisis. That quote has been attributed to a lot of people over history, but never has that been more true for everyone than now. And so in terms of sort of expanding out the universe, we know that caregivers and what a caregiver is expanding rapidly under a world in the midst of pandemic. And the best ways and the means that we have to be much more intentional about supporting the needs of the expanding universe and the need for caregivers is around policy, practice, and pay.
I'd like to now turn over to Rashmi Romanov to talk about what you're doing, the amazing work you're doing with military caregivers and veterans at the Dole Foundation.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. This is the Elizabeth Dole Foundation's first time presenting at South by Southwest. So I really want to thank Home Instead for recognizing this critical community in the dialogue around caregiving, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel. I'm here to really provide the perspective of military and veteran families and military and veteran caregivers. Our research that EDF has funded has shown that nationwide there are at least 5.5 million military and veteran caregivers that each year are providing more than $14 billion in uncompensated care to wounded and ill veterans. These are the spouses, the children, siblings, loved ones that are really helping out for our wounded and ill service members and veterans. I think, when you think about caregiving in this context, it's really interesting. It's very specific. It sort of speaks to the larger military and civilian divide that's currently happening. Across our country, less than 1% of Americans are serving in the military, and that divide continues to grow. And, when a service member or a veteran is wounded or develops a disease, they're returning home to families that are now very quickly sort of forced into adjusting to a new normal. And a part of that new normal is navigating just a tremendous maze of different state and local benefits, as well as nonprofits, and just a whole different world that was so different from their life before. Whenever we're invited to do these panels, I'm always, I'm reminded of one of our fellows who gave this quote, which I think sort of summarizes it so well. She said, "My husband volunteered to serve. He volunteered to enlist. I was drafted into being a caregiver," which I think really gets to this piece. It's not something that someone chose. It's something that now they're doing, and they have to adapt to it. I think the good news when you think about the military and veteran space is that there's a tremendous amount of goodwill towards this community. I would say it might be one of the final issues in sort of our American fabric that always garners tremendous bipartisan support. And I think as a result, there's a lot of dedicated resources. I think the VA, Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Defense, they've dedicated some resources to supporting this population. They're making expansions towards doing more and more to support military and veteran caregivers. They've invested in things like financial stipends for caregivers, respite services, housing vouchers, a lot of steps in the right direction. And I think they recognize they can be doing more and more, especially this year as we're entering the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and the population and the needs have really evolved over time. I think, however, some of the challenges are, it really is a patchwork of services, and it varies from state to state. I used to work at the VA, and they said, if you've been to one VA, you've been to one VA. And so, one of the things that I think is really challenging, and that we're really excited to be a part of the dialogue with South by Southwest and to work with such great partners at Care Academy and Home Instead with, is to really focus in on how can we standardize this military and veteran care experience. So we're providing those that are really volunteering and stepping up to do the long-term care around our defense and our homeland security issues. What are we doing to now serve those hidden heroes throughout this new journey? So really, really excited to dive into some of these topics.
I'd like to now introduce Gisela Dolan from Home Instead. Gisela, thank you so much to Home Instead for sponsoring this panel. And we're thrilled to have you talk about the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Diane, and everyone for being here today. We are so excited to elevate the topic of caregiving in front of our South by Southwest audience, such a diverse audience, but universally we know caregiving impacts everyone and we all age. So we're excited to bring this topic to an incredibly diverse audience that's going through this very universal human experience. And I'm delighted that we have Helen and Rashi and their organizations represented here today, because they're doing amazing work in this space. So thank you to all of you. At Home Instead, we provide home care services that help people age in place with dignity and respect. And we focus on our older population. Early on, we knew we were providing care to older adults, and that had been our focus and still is. But we realized pretty quickly that we were also supporting family caregivers, the daughters and sons typically who were looking for care for their aging loved ones. And so we've really expanded our services and supports over the last 26 years of our business to make sure not only are we providing wonderful care to older adults so they can have that independent, respectful aging experience, but really to empower and support their families. So when we think of caregiving, we come at it from two directions. So it's that support of family caregivers that we're hearing today and we continue to hear is woefully needed. But then also we employ professional caregivers. So with the great work that Helen and her team are doing to empower care workforce and train, that's what we're doing as an organization at Home Instead. Looking at how we can continue to bring more and more people to this important business, this important profession. COVID, as we've all mentioned, we can't have a conversation today without mentioning COVID, right? And the panels have done a nice job of highlighting that. What we've seen is that there's a spotlight now, finally, on aging and how we're caring for older adults and how we need to do better, but then also the incredible burden and responsibilities on family caregivers everywhere, and the need to bring our essential home care workforce into the light as well, and to empower them. So those are questions and challenges we wrestle with all the time at home instead. And we find different places where we can carry on conversations and partner and innovate with organizations represented here and at Southwest and really around the world, South by Southwest, excuse me, really around the world, is how do we come together to solve something that's universally going to impact all of us. We're all aging. 99.99999% of us have or will provide family caregiving responsibilities. And so how do we come together as a people to empower all of us to do better and to have a better caring experience? So that's why we're here today. And again, we're delighted that all of you are joining us.
I'm going to first start with a question to all of you, which is, what are some innovative practices or tried and true impactful and effective options out there to support caregivers?
I'm happy to dive in first. You know, when I think about, you know, something that really gets me excited, you know, I think about our campaign for inclusive care. You know, we worked with Diane a few years ago on really mapping out what the caregiver experience and the journey map was for a military and veteran caregiver, from that moment that they find out that their loved one is wounded or they've developed a disease, and really what that looks like over a lifetime. And one of the things that we found out was that the most critical point, sort of the critical juncture where so many things are decided, are those first few clinical interactions that a loved one and a caregiver is having with their veteran and with their care provider, whether it's at the VA, whether it's at a DoD facility, whether it's at a private sector clinic. The way that that provider engages the caregiver in those initial appointments and those initial visits just sets a trajectory off and sets out a healthcare experience that both the veteran and the caregiver is now going to have for the rest of that healthcare experience. So what we've been doing really closely with our partners at the Department of Veterans Affairs, all funded through the generous contributions of our partners at USAA, is we've been launching a clinical transformation initiative really focused at training and equipping VA frontline providers with the training that they need to really become an inclusive care setting for family caregivers. Everything from how are you sort of using language to include caregivers in the treatment plan? How are the settings? How is the office setting when you walk in? Is it inclusive to families? Is it a place that a spouse or a child or a family member feels comfortable in? All of these things are really, really important. And surprisingly, they're not intrinsic. They're not things that just happen overnight. It's not things that providers are necessarily all taught. It's not taught in a standardized way. And we were so excited to start this with the VA last year. Surprisingly, despite COVID and despite, you know, everything sort of turning up on its head, the VA really recognized that the time to do this is now, and getting caregiver support right is important. Our campaign for inclusive care is one of those innovative practices. You know, our website, campaignforinclusivecare.elizabethdole.org, which I'll plug, has everything there. Whether you're a VA provider or not, you can go on there, you can take the training. It's an hour. We kept it really, really simple. And we really want to partner with as many healthcare providers as possible on that.
I think I'll just quickly build off where Rashi went. We think again in two streams of caregivers: family caregivers and professional caregivers. And actually the interventions are similar. For us, it's all about education and training. We heard Rashi just express that, and I'm sure that's where Helen is going to go as well. Knowledge and education is a great equalizer. And the more information and support and education and training we can provide to both our family caregivers and professional caregivers as they're on their journeys, whether that's caring for a loved one or being a professional providing home care services, they'll feel empowered to know the path forward. So we are very focused as an organization in learning and development and training with our professional caregivers. And we do a lot of outreach at home instead to empower family caregivers, as I mentioned earlier. I think another challenge as a family caregiver is you don't always identify as a family caregiver. I think, again, many of us have gone down this journey. I know I have with my late father, and you just believe you're being a good daughter or a good son or a good partner. You don't necessarily say, I'm putting on my family caregiver hat today. I'm checking on mom, I'm checking on dad, right? And so the more that we can put education and information out where people start to realize this is a separate role than my family role or my partnership role. This is a role that I'm stepping into as a family caregiver. I need to seek out resources and support, because we may not do that if we don't realize we're taking on that role. And then lastly, I think for both family caregivers and professional caregivers, knowing that there's a community to connect with and to share is so important. So any opportunity we have to connect family caregivers with each other, whether that's through social media or someday in person when we can have coffee together or wine, because you definitely need wine sometimes, we can come together and share. You don't feel alone, and you get ideas, and you know this is a journey other people have walked, and you can walk it together. Similarly, with our professional caregivers, we're looking at ways to build more community across home instead and with other organizations so that professional caregivers can learn from each other and also feel that empowerment. So I think those are some of the innovations we've seen and are advancing and would love to see more of.
One of the things I think we've learned about providing supports and services, I think even imagining the professional caregiver or the family caregiver is a lesson, and a very humbling lesson on behalf of the customers that we work with, as well as the direct care workers themselves, is a level of flexibility and agility. I think that you know, so often we maybe talk from a very high level about supports and wraparounds. And to Gisela's point, and I think, you know, Diane, you made this point, but it is just making sure that people don't feel alone. So much of the mental strain, and I don't think it's just direct care workers, I think it's everyone, I'll even say for myself on this call, is that we are living in a time where everyone is together alone, or alone together rather. And really figuring out ways and providing very tactical ways that either employers or direct care workers or even agencies could support family members in terms of making sure to reach out, provide a phone call. At the very top of the pandemic, where no one sort of knew where we were at, you know, we got together as an exec team within 24 hours and decided that we could use our resources and provide grants to direct care workers who couldn't work, right, because of either issues or challenges in terms of entering clients' homes, right? And so we learned a very humbling lesson in terms of how do we provide, outside of our core orientation and mission, how do we just make sure we show up for our people? And our people in this case are any caregivers, and as well as our customers. So it's that sort of orientation of thinking that I think can translate in terms of policy and in terms of anyone really meeting the needs of family caregivers or direct care workers. The second thing that I'll say, and definitely to hit on education, I think that there is a wonderful silver lining coming out of the rapid education efforts that we've done and a number of organizations have done around COVID, you know, and educating people on what this meant and what to do because of this moment and this pandemic, that translates across the board. And we're finding that certainly we had everyone from family caregivers to direct care workers, hundreds of thousands of people access a free resource that we made available in March around COVID. And so we see an opportunity there to provide upskilling. So we also know an impact of this moment was that there are millions of people who are still unemployed or underemployed. There's a really great opportunity to take what they've learned coming into this pandemic and translate that into career building. And I know, you know, this is something that folks at Home Instead are definitely also thinking about as well, but we think there's just a tremendous opportunity to take what people have been doing as family caregivers or direct care workers and translate that into further opportunities. And so the Care Academy, we're longitudinally thinking about the long-term opportunities to further professionalize. You know, we all, as a matter of being professionals, have received some level of ongoing training and supports in our own career and lifetimes, and imagine that is no different if you are embarking on the career of becoming a direct care worker with a massive shortage. Is definitely an opportunity, and that's something we're thinking about, you know, on the innovation side coming out of this pandemic, the opportunity to rapidly educate and then build career from that education.
That's great. Thank you, Helen. I want to ask all of you, why are you bringing family caregiving and the caregiving profession to the South by Southwest audience today? Rashi, do you want to start?
Does someone else want to go first? I think the baby's making a lot of noise. I'll chime in later.
Caregiving in action. There you go. I completely get it. Well, I'll start off, you know, by saying in terms of the South by Southwest audience, I think we think of traditionally as tech and education and innovation. We're also talking when we think about caregiving. I think up until COVID, this has sort of been this invisible challenge or problem because I think it's caregiving is often genderized, but we're seeing that dynamically change as a result of this pandemic, so much so that it is a pillar of our current president's platform and coming into his office, so into coming into office. And so with the greatest innovative minds out there, there's an opportunity to marry that level of innovation with the greatest challenge that we saw exacerbated from the greatest public health challenge we've seen in a century, right? How do we marry those worlds? And I think this is a shout out, this is a call out, this is a battle cry to take and marry the best of tech innovation and thoughtfulness and meeting challenges head on and find ways of supporting, growing, and building networks of caregiving to support all of our needs. As folks have said, everyone will be a caregiver or cared for. And so all the more reason, I think, to bring this challenge and this battle cry to this audience today.
I would agree, Helen, wholeheartedly. I love how you said that. It is a battle cry. It is universal. Aging and caregiving is universal. It's a universal human experience that connects all of us, transcends all of geographies and every other characteristic you can think about in our diverse humanity. This is universal. It will impact all of us, and it will take all of us to solve for it. And we need the greatest minds and everyone's minds thinking about how aging and the age wave is going to impact all of us, both personally and in our career endeavors and our philanthropic endeavors. And we say at Home Instead, we want to look at all the institutions that touch humanity and make sure we're embedding the Going Gray movement in there, like the Going Green movement has been embedded. And South by Southwest and this audience has been huge when it comes to going green. We want to go gray together and partner together to make it the best universal experience for all of us, for our loved ones, our older adults, ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, and leave that legacy of an empowered aging and an empowered caregiving experience for everyone.
Yeah, and I think I would just chime in. I definitely agree with Helen and with Gisela. I think for us, the military veteran perspective on this might be a little bit different for the South by Southwest audience. It might be something that you're familiar with. Given the civilian military divide, I think it's a great sort of area of focus because it is a controlled group. And I think one thing I would invite those in the audience to think about is really when you're thinking about innovations, when you're thinking about testing it, the military and veteran space is a really great place to do that. I think it's a controlled environment. You get a lot of different care experiences within that. There's a lot of benefits with working with the VA, working with DOD. It's an integrated healthcare system. One of the pieces about our campaign for inclusive care, which has been great, is that with the electronic medical record, you can really look at outcomes and things in a systematic and standardized way. So I think when I think about the South by Southwest audience and why should they care about military and veteran caregiving, I think you can't really think about innovation outside of that space. It's where the needs are the greatest. And I think there's a lot of investments and a lot of funding happening. So really excited to collaborate with the audience on those kinds of solutions.
That's great. Thank you, Rashi. So in a quick lightning round, I'd like for each of you to share some final thoughts in the spirit of what Helen said: never waste a good crisis. What do you hope will change? What is something positive that can come out of our knowing more about caregivers as the most vital lifeline for our loved ones and keeping them safe at home?
I think in times of great crisis, you also see the beauty of humanity and how we come together. And we've seen that through this global pandemic. And we'd suggest at Home Instead that if we can take that same mindset, that same spirit to solving for our aging challenges and caregiving challenges, we'll be unstoppable as humanity. We will empower people in ways we've never empowered them before.
I'll go up. I love that. And that's a beautiful point, Gisela. I think that my hope coming out of this moment is that we need to start with community in many ways where, efforts may have fallen short. on the sort of upper echelons, we've seen really the beauty of humanity and people stepping up for their neighbors, right? So how do we, as innovators, as people who deeply care about the future of healthcare, the future of caregiving, think about ways that we undergird and ask the community first, as opposed to an afterthought? It is making the invisible now visible. And so where do we take those learnings and what do we do to grow communities to support one another in times of great crisis?
Yeah, and I would definitely, piggybacking off of what Helen said, I think this year has shown us a lot of opportunities. I think one thing that we've recognized is, we call all of our military and veteran caregivers hidden heroes because we don't know where they are. It's not as if everyone's raising their hand. There's a lot of issues around, identification by yourself, self-identification around being a caregiver. What I would ask all of the audience members to think about, I think personally and then also professionally, is, there are military and veteran caregivers in every single community across our country. Do you know where they are? What are you doing to support them? I think personally, sort of as citizens, as neighbors, getting to understand where those people are in your community and what they might need. But then professionally, it's a cause that every sector can support, public or private. So as everyone mentioned, internet access has been an issue, in-home technology, food insecurity, transportation. Military families need help with all of this. So sort of regardless of where you sit, would love to sort of engage and get into some public-private partnership discussions about how we can best support military caregivers.
That's great. Thank you so much. Helen, Rashi, and Gisela, what a great conversation. Our caregivers are indeed hidden heroes and they need our support.